All the other states have backed off. We're the only one now. All the other states realized this was not a good idea. There was widespread opposition across the political spectrum, and sanity prevailed everywhere but Utah. And the rest of them realized that the best way to solve these problems is through consensus building and collaboration, not through confrontational approaches that violate the Constitution.
There is a bill particularly in here this year for funding of county level resource management plans across the state, with the hope that they'll become a scientifically backed collaborative tool to engage in planning with federal agencies. Do you see that as being a more rational approach?
Well, we have to be careful with the word rationality, because in politics, rationality becomes someone's point of view, right? I would certainly want to engage counties in their planning process. That's part of collaboration, is that the federal government works with counties. And good science is always welcome. We can always use good science.
That actually has often been cited as that FEMA's requirement, or not FEMA, sorry, FLIPMA's requirement was that they were to collaborate. Yeah, until it's a story. Was to collaborate as closely as possible with local level and state level planning.
Yes, I'm totally in favor of that. All stakeholders should be included. No one should be exempted. The whole point of this rally is that the public lands belong to everyone, and that includes state and local officials, that includes the people of rural Utah, that includes the people here in Salt Lake, and it includes the people in New Jersey and Montana and Florida. They're all owners of the public lands. They should all have a voice in their management.
There are a lot of misperceptions on both sides of the argument. From your perspective, can you cite them on both sides of that debate?
The misconceptions? Well, the most fundamental misconception is that there was a promise made in the Enabling Act to give these lands to Utah. That's absolutely, fundamentally not true. There is no promise. That's very clear. In fact, there are two statements made that very clearly are disclaimer clauses saying, Utah, this is all the land you get, okay? Now, on the other side, among these people, I think there's a widespread fear that a lot of the lands will be sold to the highest bidder. Now, that's conjecture. We don't know. We don't know if the state would do that. There's currently a bill being considered right now to estimate how much property taxes would accrue if we sold them. So somebody has an interest in that. And if we look at these school trust lands as a model, that's the one program where the state has a lot of rural land. They sold half of them. So I think that fear might be legitimate.
And then the other side would contend in that argument, though, that our traditional use has been public land multiple use, and that it would disrupt local economies to step away from it. They're just looking at a change of management, if I were arguing from the other point of view.
Sure. The definition of public use and multiple use management is that you can't make everyone happy. So multiple use means everybody gets some of what they want, but not everything. So there are some disgruntled people who didn't get everything they want on both sides. The political reality is that public lands are managed for a variety of uses, and those uses sometimes conflict with one another, and that's where the collaborative process comes in. So we all get something. We get some oil, and we get some recreation, and we get some privatization, and we get some tourism, and we get some gas and coal, but nobody gets everything. I actually think that's a fairly good approach because it reflects the great diversity of the stakeholders in these public lands, which is everybody.
One last question. The goal to come away from this rally for people who are watching the story and the coverage, what's the goal?
Try to convince the legislature to quit wasting money on this effort. They're spending millions of dollars of our tax money on a goal that is doomed to failure, and even if it succeeded, it wouldn't be good for Utah. Let's quit wasting money on this. Instead, let's collaborate, let's talk, let's work out our problems.
Yeah, what is your understanding of the transfer of public lands?
Well, if it's, I mean, it denies access to hikers and people who want to go mountain biking and skiing, and I mean, it restricts those areas for those kind of people. It should be protected. A lot of other people don't respect it either. It won't be as clean, and I mean, we're already having a problem enough as it is with the lack of clean air and stuff.
And so there's some people, the people behind the movement are claiming that they are trying to protect access by passing this. What would be your answer when they say that?
I'm sorry, I'll say that again.
Okay, there are some people who support this, the guys in the legislature and like, would say, well, we're trying to protect access because under its current management, we can't do anything. So how would you answer their complaint?
I would actually try to look more into it. I want to know how that would protect access.
I'm just asking one question of everybody.
Okay.
How would you define the public lands transfer?
Well, I think of course, it's illegal, but I also think it's immoral because the land does not belong to the state legislature, to Utah government. It belongs to everybody, and that's the way it was designed from the get-go, and I think it should remain that way.
Okay.
You don't want to brief history.
Well, no, I mean, I've followed. I'm just trying to get everybody's take on it. So what would be the impact of a public lands transfer if it were to ever happen?
Well, according to the state legislature, it would have to be purchased, or else there'd have to be an act of Congress signed by the president allowing the sale of that land. But they would never, the federal government's never just going to deed that over without compensation, because that in itself would take a Supreme Court act, from what I understand.
Okay.
So I think the impact, and the people I know, particularly in fire and aviation, just the cost to suppress fires in the state would be astronomical, and that's typically a cost that's shared through the federal government and the public agencies.
Actually, I believe it's shared three ways. Counties are responsible for some of it,
Very
state
small.
for some of it, and the federal government.
The federal government picks up the lion's share, and it picks up 100% on public lands, and then on state and private lands, there's usually a cost share agreement, and the governor can go ahead and run that through FEMA to get federal money for that too.
So I noticed you have access to public lands and access for boating. The people who are supporting it say that access is the reason they're trying to pass it. What would be your answer to?
Well, for this, in terms of the public access, are you talking about up there in Rich County, that bill?
No, I'm just talking about just the general transfer of public lands initiative, a series of bills the state has passed. The people that have been behind it say, well, we're trying to preserve access to our public lands because they say the federal government denies that. So
that's not true. The federal government has all public lands are opened to all the public. The only exception would be in national wilderness areas where it's limited to motorized access. And the public lands bill does not include national wilderness areas, nor national parks. They're focused on national forest and BLM lands, which are opened on designated routes to everyone.
People, a single question. What does the transfer of public lands mean? Describe the transfer of public lands?
Well, my understanding is that Utah would want to give control of the public land, or take control of the public lands away from the federal government, but they don't have the budget to do that. So the only way they'll be able to afford to do that is to lease them to the oil companies, and it seems to be well understood that that's the plan. And that's why we're here to protest against that, because I don't want to see my kids' heritage of our public lands wasted on strip mining and drilling and locked up in leases.
Well, how about you?
I pretty much can echo what he just said. I feel like that the argument against taking the lands and putting them into Utah's hands, basically, or away from the public, is going to do nothing but promote big oil access to it's another way of them trying to get their hands on it. They've been trying to do it for a while, and they're just kind of disguising it in a different way now, to me. And so I think that it's going to end up, if they are successful, it'll end up hurting us, and we will lose all of the beautiful areas that we've been able to enjoy for generations. So,
Thank you very much.
Thank
like
you.
the signs. See, it's all it takes is just being near.
It's your hat.
I
You
know.
want us to do.
Stands out too much.
Okay, so we're doing a story on the county seat about the rally today, and our one question we're asking everybody is, define your understanding of the transfer of public lands. What is it?
Well, my understanding of transfer of public lands is, in this case, in the Utah state situation, is state government want to take control of appropriated federal lands, already federal lands that are here for the use of all individuals. And Utah State has a history of taking those over and turning those over to special interest groups for their profit, as opposed to the benefit of the people of Utah and the rest of the country and the world. This is one of the great lands on all the earth, and we have visitors from all over the world. And the federal government is in much better shape, even though the current election puts both houses in control of Republicans. It's still in much better position to take care of these lands and protect them. I was born and raised in Utah, and I love these lands, and I'm afraid to see what might happen if they are transferred to the state of Utah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. You're welcome. Okay. We're doing a story on the rally for the county seat program. Okay. So I'm just asking one question of everybody.
Okay.
Okay, what is your understanding of the transfer of public lands? What does it mean?
State's going to have to lease out the land to different individuals, and we'll lose it. And it's our public land. It's not theirs to take.
So you see this as an access issue?
Oh, more than an access issue. We'll become like Texas, where nobody has any access. It's all about money.
That's probably the biggest argument on the other side as well, is to say, well, our access is restricted by the federal government. So you're both sides making the same argument.
That's good. That way, we'll win.
Okay, very good.
Very articulate. Talk to him.
You have to stand next to him.
Oh, I could stand next to him. I could be his
That's it.
wingman.
You're the poser guy.
Yeah.
All right, we're doing a story for the county seat about transfer of public lands and the rally. And the rally today, I'm asking just one question. Define for me your understanding of the transfer of public lands.
My understanding of the transfer of public lands is that the state of Utah feels they can better manage the lands within the boundaries of the state of Utah, and my concern is that it will be managed more with a priority on mineral and oil resources, and not balancing that with just preservation and access to recreation and just wildlands.
So the same.
Oh, no, I'm out. I'm going to let him articulate that. No, I'm going to stand.
Yeah.
Okay. The other is, one of their biggest arguments they claim is no access. The federal government has restricted access to so much land. So you basically have both sides using or centering their arguments around protecting access.
Right, and
What's your thought on that?
I think it gets down to probably different user groups, and there has to be a common ground. I mean, all these things are kind of it's about compromise, but I mean, sometimes compromise may not be the answer. Here it is. There'll be some compromise, but I think if you're speaking of like motorized vehicles and I don't have a strong opinion on that. I think, yeah, I mean, I don't. That's a big discussion.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Be articulate.
Both talk. I'm actually just going to ask one question for today.
All right.
All right. What is your understanding of the transfer of public lands? Explain to me what you think it is.
I think it's really the age-old argument of who has control. And is it the local? Is it the federal? Is it some voodoo that we don't even understand? We don't know that. What I'm concerned about is that whoever thinks they have control, they don't understand that not everybody worships at that holy grail of development at any cost. Whether it's the state legislator, so-called leaders, whether it's our federal so-called leaders. This land isn't theirs. It's not yours. It's not mine. This land is my great-grandchildren's. This is for future generations. And we are responsible as everyday citizens to say, wait a minute, you don't have that right to do it for the few and not for the many. This is about the many. And I hope Utahns start saying, what is it we want to pass on? Not, oh, yes, development at any cost. I'm not worshiping at that holy grail. And I hope the Utahns start saying, we're not going to worship at that holy grail either. So that's all I got to say.
Okay, well, that was you're right, she's very articulate. Have anything you want to add?
No, she spoke very well.
Thank you. The question today.
Yeah.
What is your definition or understanding of the transfer of public lands?
My understanding is that the governor is trying to take back federal lands from the federal government, though I'm not sure why it's taking it back, because my understanding is that it was never the state of Utah's lands ever. It was always federal lands. So yeah, that's my understanding. Is they're trying to take federal lands and make them Utah state lands.
What do you think would be different if the transfer took place?
Well, I think from a management standpoint, I'm not quite sure. I have doubts as to how the state of Utah would manage all of that land, because there is a great deal of land in Utah that is federally managed, and right. And quite frankly, I think it's managed pretty well. So I'm not sure why there's an impetus to take it and make it Utah lands. And yeah, I mentioned that I don't think the state of Utah would do a very good. I don't think they're equipped to manage that much land.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.